Today's podcast is going to focus on the independent contractor rule, which the Department of Labor just issued in January 2024. Today's podcast is recorded on January 12th, 2024, and the information in here is current as of today's date. The rule itself will go into effect on March 11th, 2024. Now, a number of different federal agencies and states have guidances or rules to help determine whether a worker is an independent contractor or an employee. These agencies and states care because there are certain things that employees get that independent contractors do not. For example, unemployment, workers' compensation coverage, and for purposes of the Department of Labor, overtime pay and minimum wages. Now, these different agencies and states have different tests to determine whether someone is an independent contractor or not. When I was teaching at Ohio State, I would liken it to a vegetable soup recipe. Everyone has their own recipe and combination of ingredients that they like for their vegetable soup, but some people will put in more onions and some people will put in more garlic. That is how these agencies and states function. Essentially, they are looking at the same set of factors. Some just put a little bit more emphasis on certain factors than others. So what we're going to do is walk through the basic parts of this independent contractor final rule and understand how are they examining whether somebody is an independent contractor or not, and how is this different from what the Department of Labor was doing before. The Department of Labor had a guidance which was in effect during the Trump administration, which it was believed loosened the test to make it easier to find a worker to be an independent contractor. It focused on two core factors: the employer's control and the person's opportunity for profit or loss. The current administration appears to have wanted to tighten the test and make sure that only true contractors are so classified. They want minimum wage and overtime to be available for workers who are truly employees. So they're going to focus on whether someone is truly economically independent, and that is what makes an independent contractor. So what they did was they said, we're going to move back to the economic reality test, where we're going to look at 6 factors. None is going to be weighted more heavily than any other. And we're going to see whether this person is truly in business for themselves. So those 6 factors are: first, opportunity for profit or loss depending on managerial skill. In the final rule, it was pointed out that this is specifically not the opportunity to increase profit simply by working more hours. Instead, we're looking at what kind of skill the worker is using to expand, for example, its client base and its work opportunities and the type of work that it's getting. Is there some entrepreneurial effort that's involved to increase that opportunity for profit? Second, the relative investments by the worker and the potential employer. And the DOL is moving away from a pure dollar-to-dollar comparison of investments and instead examining whether the worker is making a similar type of investment, but just on a smaller scale, as the employer. Third is the degree of permanence of the work relationship. Fourth is the nature and degree of control. Now, if you've paid attention to the independent contractor guidance or examination on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service, they do put a lot of emphasis on control. That's one of the big 3 things that they look at. So with respect to control for the DOL, relevant to this include setting the schedule, supervising the work, and explicitly limiting the ability to work for others. The final rules touched on remote or minimal supervision and made a specific point that, and I quote, "a lack of supervision is not alone indicative of independent contractor status, such as when the employer's business or the nature of the work make direct supervision unnecessary." End quote. 5 is the integral part of the business factor, something that the ABC test puts a lot of emphasis on. That is the extent to which the work performed is an integral part of the potential employer's business. This factor weighs in favor of the worker being an employee when the work that they perform is critical, necessary, or central to the potential employer's principal business. Finally, number 6 is skill and initiative. Both independent contractors and workers can have specialized skills. Merely having a specialized skill, such as welding, as is called out in the final rule, is not enough to say, yes, this person absolutely is an independent contractor. Instead, the distinction that they make is whether the person is using those skills, quote, in a manner that evidences business-like initiative, end quote, like marketing and promoting those skills and building their client base. So it is important to review your independent contractor arrangements and ensure that your worker is not economically dependent on your company. And for purposes of the Department of Labor, overtime, and minimum wage, you want to look at those different 6 factors.